When we hear debates over public health rules, specifically vaccine requirements, almost all of us instantly picture the exact same thing: kids, classrooms, and childhood immunization charts. We instinctively treat it as an issue strictly confined to the schoolyard. But two pieces of legislation in Connecticut, HB5044 and SB450, move the focus. If you look closely at the text of these bills, the legal scope expands. The regulations are no longer focused strictly on students. The new language specifically dictates rules for residents of this state. That phrasing pulls every single adult in Connecticut under the exact same regulatory umbrella. The scope of these health directives has shifted far beyond the playground. The entire adult population is now the target, and this expansion occurred with almost no public awareness. The reason this expansion flew under the radar is tied to what citizens and the media are trained to look for. We expect sweeping changes to arrive in the form of a loud, highly debated, universal mandate bill. This framework is being assembled through separate, quieter legislative actions. By dispersing the components across different bills, the state builds a comprehensive system without the attention a single massive law would attract. This architecture relies on two distinct pillars. First, a shift in how legal authority is exercised. Second, the creation of a technological infrastructure designed to track the population. Understanding the full impact requires looking at how these individual legislative actions interact to create a single, cohesive system. The first pillar relies on those two bills, HB5044 and SB450. They take the power to make public health decisions out of state law and transfer it to the Department of Public Health as an administrative standard of care. To see why that matters, look at this split-screen flowchart. On the left is the traditional pathway for passing a formal law. It requires friction, public hearings, floor debates, legislative votes, and extensive media coverage. The public has a say at multiple points. An administrative standard of care functions differently. Once the legislature hands over that authority, the Department of Public Health can update these internal rules directly. No floor debates, no formal votes, and no required public input. Moving these rules out of the legislative process and into an administrative policy means the directives can be expanded quickly. This shift in authority is designed to bypass democratic friction, allowing public health requirements for adults to be rewritten in a purely administrative setting. But creating an administrative rule for millions of adult residents presents a logistical problem. You need a way to monitor and enforce compliance across the entire state. That requires a concurrent legislative push. Right now, additional state bills are moving through the session aimed at funding and building broad new data systems. This diagram shows how those systems work. These data networks pull together information that used to live in separate silos. They draw direct communication lines across state education systems, workforce databases, and public service records. By financing the technological hardware to run these networks, the state is building a centralized mechanism capable of verifying which residents meet the administrative standards. When you pair a frictionless rulemaking mechanism with overarching data tracking, the result is a fully operational system for population-wide compliance. To be completely clear, none of this legislation explicitly says we are implementing a universal mandate for every adult starting tomorrow. The framework is what matters. The foundation for this system is being poured right now, ensuring it's ready the moment the state activates it. These administrative standards will materialize at the point of service because the standard of care set by the state becomes the legal benchmark for the private sector. Insurance companies often tie coverage and premiums to these state-sanctioned standards, and corporate HR departments use them to define workplace liability and safety policies. A shift in the state's internal rules creates a cascade of requirements across your private life. Once a system like this is legally authorized and technologically funded, it becomes incredibly difficult to dismantle. The time to scrutinize the design of a building is while the blueprints are on the table. You have to ask the hard questions and decide if you agree with this system before it becomes a permanent reality.